Good morning, and welcome to our Sunday worship service. I'm Martha Schmidt. I've been a member of this church for a long time. Sometimes I say 30 years, and then someone comes up and says, "Oh, Martha, it's been longer than that." I'll be your celebrant this morning. I'd like to extend a special welcome to all of those who are joining us for the first time. We are very glad you are here. If you haven't already stopped, there is a welcome table in the foyer.
Here, I'll stop that.
Is it an echo?
Yep.
I couldn't tell if that was locally or everywhere.
I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Or maybe I'll take it to Alex and Alex will figure it out.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was just in my head. Please stop at the welcome table in the foyer and pick up a name tag and a newcomer's packet. Our welcoming committee members have yellow name tags and can point you toward additional information. If you're joining us online, we ask you to fill out the newcomer form on the website so that we can be in touch to answer any questions that you might have. Meanwhile, our usual practice is to gather in community for coffee and conversation after the service, either downstairs in our fellowship hall or in our Zoom room. We want everyone to feel supported and at home here. So let's begin in that spirit by saying our words of welcome together. Whether this is your first or your 1,000th Sunday with us, and whether you strolled, rolled, Zoomed, ran, or danced in, we are glad you chose to join us. We are one people of many beliefs, identities, origins, sexualities, and genders. All are welcome here. Now we will take a moment to say hello across the technical divide. First, we're going to show the people joining us on Zoom. If you are at home, please turn on your camera. Now, people at home, wave. Now, people who are attending the service in our building, it's your turn to wave. We do have an announcement. Suzanne?
Good morning. I'm Suzanne Senior. I'm a church board member, and I'm also part of the Ignite Grant Committee, along with Jen Elliott and Judy Brown. And I have an announcement about the Ignite Grant. The Ignite Grant is a new annual program sponsored by the UUCP that will utilize endowment funds to support meaningful projects that reflect the values of our church community. Successful proposals can have a wide range of ideas, but should focus on benefiting the church, its community, or our broader community at large. This funding is meant for new creative project ideas. Members of the congregation or UUCP committees are eligible to apply and may request from $500 up to a maximum of $12,000 total for the 2025-2026 application period. Applications are open now through March 30th, and funds will be available to selected applicants starting May 1st, 2025. Detailed application criteria and a simple one-page application is available on the UUCP website. Or you can email the Ignite Grant Organizing Committee at 2025ignitegrant@palouse.uu.org. Thank you.
We preface our service by acknowledging our church was built on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called the Nez Perce, the Palouse, and the Stiets Aumsh, called the Coeur d'Alene. Let us pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was unfairly taken, and that cries out for reverent care. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. We are hoping that folks joining us via Zoom have a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let's light our chalices together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share. Please stand.
Thank you. Please be seated. What did Sam tell me? He said, I have a knack for being like just too close or just too far away. Too far away. So I have to be closer. Closer. Okay, there we go. Oh. So good morning, everyone. I am the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, and I'm lucky enough that I get to serve this congregation as its minister. Now, those of you who come every week know that we sing our children off to classes with a little song called the Reeb Benediction. And it's very sweet, but the story behind its composer, James Reeb, is not so sweet. It's actually quite tragic. Reeb was a Unitarian minister who went to Selma in the aftermath of Bloody Sunday and was martyred there 60 years ago this coming Tuesday. His courage and sacrifice changed the course of history. This morning we'll be wondering together, how did he decide to go? What made him leave behind his own children and put himself into danger? If he knew what was going to happen, might he have made a different choice? In these challenging times when our shared values are under attack in the public square, I think many of us are struggling to decide what we should do. We're weighing our personal safety and well-being against the potential good we might accomplish. We're thinking through what we are going to be willing to risk. And these are big, hard questions, the kinds of questions for which there are no right or wrong answers. Each of us must enter into discernment, make our own choices, and act in the ways that are good and right for us. If we avoid risk altogether, we're complicit, but it's not helpful to take needless risks either. How can we be strategic? And more importantly, how can we be faithful? So as we remember James Reeb together, let's ask ourselves, what does our faith ask of us here and now? How do we choose to answer the call of love? Let's start by singing together. Our opening hymn is number 210. It's wrong in your bulletin. Number 210, Wade in the Water. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit. And now I'd like to invite the children forward. Ginger's going to read you a story. If you brought non-perishable groceries for our little free pantry, please bring them with you when you come.
Now we'll take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity. For those of you able to make a contribution, the logistics are on the screen. We typically give away all of the cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose missions align with our values, a program called the Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is Circles of Caring Adult Day Health, whose mission is to make it possible for adults living with dementia and chronic illness to be successful, safe, and surrounded by family and friends. To donate, please indicate Month of Sundays on your check or from the online drop-down menu. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we will now take some time to practice generosity together.
I invite you now into a time of meditation or prayer with these words by Kimberly Byer Nelson. So get comfortable, take a few deep breaths, settle into this time and place. For peace is. This is how we are called. In the hours before the birds stream airborne with chiming voice, a silent breath rests in the pines and upholds the surface of the lake as if it were a fragile bubble in the very hand of God. And I think this is how we are called. To cup our hands and hold this peace, even when the sirens begin, even when sorrow cries out, old and gnarled, even when words grow fangs and rend. Cupped hands, gently open, supporting peace like the golden hollow of a singing bowl, like the towering rim of mountains cradling this slumbering and mist-draped valley. Let's rest in the silence together. Amen, and blessed be. Today, I'm going to share the story of James Reeb. James Reeb, Jim Reeb was how he was called, was a Unitarian minister, and he was what we'd now call a community minister, which is to say that he didn't serve a congregation. He lived in Boston, and he worked at the American Friends Service Committee's Boston Housing Program, which focused on desegregation. He deliberately moved his family to majority Black Roxbury, Massachusetts, believing it essential to embed himself in the community he was trying to serve. He and his wife Marie had 4 children. 60 years ago, about now, they were watching news reports out of Selma, Alabama. Footage of what came to be known as Bloody Sunday. 100 angry deer wielding billy clubs indiscriminately and sicking attack dogs on men, women, and children. I'm going to share now an excerpt from White Lies, an NPR podcast that details Jim's story. I recommend listening to the entire season if you have the time. It's an important piece of history and a very skilled piece of investigative reporting. But for now, an invitation to imagine ourselves in that moment when Jim and Marie decided that he was going to go to Selma.
The cameramen on the bridge rushed to develop their footage and send it on to their producers in New York. Within hours, the violence in Selma is the lead story on every network. One of the people watching the news that night is a man named James Reeb, whom everyone calls Jim. He's a white Unitarian minister. He's living in Boston. He's working on low-income housing issues. And he's watching the footage that night with his wife, Marie. They're both outraged, and Jim feels sick, feels like he has to do something.
The next day, Martin Luther King sends telegrams to major denominations throughout the country calling on clergy of conscience to descend on Selma and lend their support to the cause of the marchers. Jim Reeb doesn't need much prodding. He knows he has to go. His wife Marie doesn't want him to go. They've got 4 young children. She watched the footage from Selma with them, the brutality of the troopers. Think of what could happen. But she also knows the man she married, knows that when he's made his mind up, there's no dissuading him. So after Jim reads a bedtime story to his daughters, Marie drives him to Logan Airport.
Jim participated in a march led by Martin Luther King Jr. and then went to dinner with his 2 colleagues at one of the 2 Black-owned diners in Selma. After dinner, he called home and checked in with Marie. And then the 3 ministers began to walk back to the place they were staying. And they took a different route than they'd taken to get to the diner. This new, shorter route took them in front of a very sketchy bar frequented by the kind of white folks who had similar attitudes as highway patrol officers. In their mind, Black people and the white people who were supporting the civil rights were less than human. They were unwelcome in their city, their state, and their lives. A small group of men who held these beliefs began following Jim Reeb and his friends and eventually attacked them. One of them hit Jim in the head with a club. Jim fell to the ground, where they kept kicking and punching him, while also attacking the other 2 ministers. Eventually, the attack stopped. Jim wasn't able to stand up on his own, so his friends helped him to his feet and took him to one of the headquarters of the civil rights movement just a few blocks away. Because civil rights protesters weren't welcome at the white hospital, they took Jim to the Black clinic, where the doctor was able to identify a brain injury that would require the care of a neurosurgeon. The closest one was 2 hours away in Birmingham, so they loaded Jim into an ambulance and began to drive. The ambulance got a flat tire. A second ambulance had to be found. And by the time they got to the hospital in Birmingham, it was too late. There was really nothing that could be done. Jim Reeb died 2 days later. Here's another clip. This is from an interview with his wife, Marie.
Reeb arrived midday on Wednesday, interviewed. But those around her had told her that she had an obligation, that this tragedy was not just a personal one, but that the whole world was watching and waiting for word from her. So just 24 hours after her husband had been attacked, Marie walked into the hospital director's office. TV cameramen, reporters, photographers, they were crowded into the cramped space. Marie sat behind the hospital director's desk. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she looked down at them or at the microphone throughout most of the interview.
Was the decision for your husband to come here a mutual decision? Did you sit down together and discuss it?
Yes, he came home about 6 in the evening, and I was preparing supper, and he asked to come upstairs to discuss a matter. He said that he wanted to go to Selma, and what I thought about it. And I said that I would prefer that he didn't go, but I knew how he felt, and I knew that he felt that he had to go.
Did you have any communication with your husband prior to the time he was attacked?
Yes, he called about 8 to say that everything was fine and that he would be home the next day.
Do you think the cause for which your husband came to Selma was worth it?
I don't feel that I can answer that for myself. I can only answer for Jim that any consequence I could bear.
She can't. What? What am I unplugging? Okay. This is what happens when Sam, our music director, has a Sunday off. So I hope you caught that last question. They asked, do you believe that this cause merited his sacrifice? And she said she couldn't answer that for herself, but she knows that for him, no cost was too high. It turned out that Jim Reeb's death triggered nationwide protests and helped convince Lyndon B. Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act. When Barack Obama was elected in 2008, the Unitarian Universalist Association sent flowers to his descendants, as well as those of Violet Liozzo, another white Unitarian who was murdered while taking part in the civil rights movement. So that sweet little song that we sing to our kids every week, it was written by a hero, a martyr, someone who felt called to put himself at risk for a greater cause. It was written by someone who paid the ultimate price for being true to his faith and living his values. Gary?
I'm Gary Peterson. Good morning. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing our praise than when we first begun.
That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. This is a reflection on how I found meaningful work here at UUCP. I didn't grow up in a church community. My family didn't go to church. And I've heard it said that that is being unchurched. I've heard that said here in my years of going to lots of meetings. But the grandmas on both sides of my family were practicing Christian Scientists, and I did grow up with the language and ideas of that religion, which is that above all, God is love, and that we as humans can be well. It took a few years of me attending church regularly here at the UUCP for me to realize that I was developing a personal spirituality that aligns with the words that we have here on our wall. The ideas presented in the sermons and in the hymns here at the UUCP resonate with me as truth. I also came to realize that being of service to others is a strong component of being a good UU. I was helpful here at church from the very beginning, taking my turn teaching RE to the children, serving as a greeter, making coffee, and cleaning up the kitchen on Sunday morning. But I started to feel troubled that the really worthwhile service work was on the front lines, so to speak. Traveling to protest for Black Lives Matter as an example. And I wondered if I was deficient as a member of this church. I remember a summer service about 15 years ago when Bruce Pittman came here as a guest speaker, and he told us about a new program called Family Promise that our church could participate in with a dozen or so other churches in our communities. Each participating church would house and prepare meals for homeless families with kids, while the family worked with a social worker to find employment and housing. Homelessness and food security was a big topic in our community at that time, and someone had a plan for helping. I was thrilled. I was somewhat nervous the first time I prepared a meal and came to eat with people that I had never met before, but I quickly thought about how they might be feeling about the whole situation. And I was able to look into my heart and bring my smiling graciousness and my love out to the front. I enjoy preparing good food for our guests and sitting down with them in our fellowship hall for a shared meal. Committing my time and energy to helping with Family Promise is emotionally and psychologically rewarding to me. I don't know what we may need to do to stand up for human rights at this time in our existence. I am grateful for this beloved community where I know I am loved and worthy and not at all alone. I believe that being a part of UUCP helps me be ready for the future.
Thank you. When we tell the story of Jim Reeb, I'm struck by the fact that he and the other Unitarians who went to Alabama weren't the only ones answering the call of our faith. I think about Marie driving her husband to the airport and then going home to care for her children. I think about the people who surely rallied around her after the tragedy, bringing casseroles and doing her laundry and watching the kids. I think about the caring friends and perhaps even her minister who surely brought a gentle and compassionate presence to support her after Jim's death. And when I reflect on what my own faith calls me to do, or has called me to do, I do think about the times I've left my comfort zone and participated in protests or civil disobedience, particularly the time I went to Ferguson to join in the demonstrations after Mike Brown was killed, and that time I got arrested with the Poor People's Campaign in Olympia. Every protest I've helped organize for the Women's March, immigrant rights, etc., the truth of it is, I get so nervous ahead of time that I can't eat. But I'll tell you the truth. Do you know what's even scarier and harder than going out and working for justice in the world? Walking into the home of a family who's just lost a loved one. It feels like such an intrusion. Who am I to think that I'm worthy to console people in life's most devastating moments? And here's a confession. The first time I was called to do it, I failed. My fear and discomfort were so great that I didn't offer adequate pastoral care to a grieving widow. She was on my internship committee, and her husband died suddenly and unexpectedly. And I knew my supervisor, her actual minister, was there for her. I couldn't imagine she'd want my clumsy baby minister self intruding on her grief, but she did. And later she shared her disappointment, saying, "I know it's hard, but you have to reach out. It's your job now. It's your job now." Those words have echoed in my heart throughout my entire career. I had to learn to just show up. It's never been easy. To be honest, even after 25 years, I still have to give myself a little pep talk before I walk into a home or a hospital where someone is dying or has just died. But I remember that widow all those years ago. I told myself, it's your job, just do it. Now, it's my fear of my own inadequacy in the phrase of tragedy that makes it harder to do what love asks of me. And it's my fear of my own powerlessness that makes it harder to do what love asks of me. I think it's always fear that's the barrier when you come right down to it. And that's why I think about the world and our choices, not in terms of right and wrong, or even good and evil, but in terms of love and fear. Fear leads to dehumanization, harm, and destruction. Love, meanwhile, we can trust to always point us in the right direction. So a central practice is to ask myself in any moments where I have to make a decision, what is the most loving thing I can do? And that answer shifts and changes. Sometimes the most loving thing I can do is stay home and take care of myself. Sometimes it's helping others, and sometimes love calls me to push through my fear and do things that feel scary and hard or even impossible. One of my seminary professors once told me, we need to move toward what gives us joy, and then with equal determination toward that which scares us. Because sometimes love calls us to do brave things, and sometimes it calls us to embrace and celebrate the goodness and beauty in our lives. Both of these calls are important. Now, our faith is free, and we are each the expert on where it is calling us individually. I would never imply that we are all called to emulate Jim Reeb. Our faith doesn't necessarily call us to heroism or even activism, but it does call us to love as bravely and consistently as we can. Our call is personal. We live it out imperfectly. And what we do together here is remind one another that we have a higher purpose. We remind one another that what we do matters. We remind one another that love is always calling. And we create a space where we each listen for that call. We bring each other back to our best selves, and for that I am profoundly grateful. It's being part of this community that makes doing all those things that feel scary and hard and even impossible possible. As Mother Teresa put it, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And this is how we find our way through challenging times. We lead with love, today and always. I invite you to rise now in body or spirit. Let's sing hymn number 116, I'm on my way. Our closing reading is May Your Call Be Awakened by Michelle LaGrave. We come to religious community from many paths and with diverse needs. If you have come here seeking comfort, may your pain be soothed. If you have come here looking for answers, may you find new questions. If you've come here seeking purpose, may your call be awakened. If you have come here hoping to build a new way, may the path open before you. Let's sing together our sung benediction, There is a Love. Please join me in the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. So go into the world then and remember that love is calling. Love is calling. It's not necessarily calling you to do something brave or desperate or tremendous. Sometimes it's just calling you to pick up that piece of trash by the side of the road, to give that person over there who looks kind of lonely a hug, or even just a smile. Love works in these tiny, tiny moments, and we need to take advantage of every one, because the forces that are arrayed against love, they are scary and they are powerful and they are wreaking havoc with our society. And I have faith that love will win. Love always wins in the end, but it takes each and every one of us answering love's call. So know that I love you. Know that you are a blessing in this world. Go in peace. Come back next Sunday.